All right, so this is the latest episode of the Skull Sessions podcast with me as your host, and our guest today is Mike Pickard. Is that right? Is that
Yep,
your
that's right.
Okay, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Uh, well, I describe my life as three phases. I started out as a computer software guy and did that for about 28 years. Uh, and then I retired, and the story about that is boring. Uh, but then I still needed money, so I went back to work in computer retail, working for Apple. And I worked in a store on the sales floor for 14 years. Uh, and 40 hours a week on your feet was pretty tough. So I needed physically to retire from that. And so I turned my avocation into my vocation and became a full-time author.
Okay, and what you do sci-fi now? Is that correct?
Well, so I started with sci-fi because it's a really comfortable genre for me. Lets me do just about anything I can imagine. But my latest novel is my first murder mystery. So I've branched out a little bit. And based on reviews, I did okay.
So, what the sci-fi is kind of like the genre that you felt like the most used to, the most like familiar with, and you tried to branch to something different, and you think you're saying it's working for you so far?
Yeah, one of the things I noticed in the last couple of sci-fi novels, so the one that came out last year and the year before, I had protagonists who weren't detectives, uh, and they weren't amateur sleuths either. Uh, but they were following clues and they were figuring things out. And after a couple of novels that had that aspect to it, I thought, okay, well, maybe I've got the chops to actually do a full blown murder mystery. And I always like to set the bar a little higher for myself, otherwise, you don't improve. So I gave it a shot. And a single murder mystery novel is actually one story told over 3 volumes. So the one that just came out, Creative Deductions Home Run, is volume one of a 3 volume set. Think about Lord of the Rings, right? That's really one story broken up into 3 pieces. So delete the Hobbit and insert the detective, and you have my trilogy.
Wait, do you have Oryx and the Eye of Sauron and the Two Rings?
No, no, none of that either. But I have 2 dead bodies and a mystery drug and some evil that lurks in the background. So,
Well, I would think that you could do sci-fi with detectives. Like, did you see The Expanse?
uh, yeah, I have seen movies and TV shows where the setting is either a space station or another planet, and the protagonist is in fact law enforcement. Uh, I have 4 novels in the pipeline, actually 5 stories in the pipeline. Uh, the second and third volumes of Creative Deductions, but the other two of the others are sci-fi, and one is a young adult, uh, which has a bit of magic and supernatural to it.
Okay. Wait, what's the supernatural like? It's just I mean, there's a bunch of like sci-fi tropes, but usually the supernatural is like alien. Sometimes it's like more like Event Horizon, like a kind of mix of like a dimension of hell with like an alien presence, otherworldly, multi-dimensional. You know, what angle were you going for?
So I'm not sure when I'll end up doing this with all the projects I've got going, but uh, it's called The Midnights, Knights, and it's about 3 kids in middle school who go to a museum, touch a magic gem, and they get special powers. One of them can read minds and influence people. One gets extraordinary strength, and the other one can become invisible. And they come across who they think is the bad guy, the principal of their school, who has stolen money from a carnival that they held so they could send the chess team to a state tournament. And so they've got to try to figure out how to get the money back and battle him.
What, this is a young adult novel? This is
Yeah.
young adult sci-fi, or just young adult?
This is young adult, and then because I didn't think the plot was rich enough, their science teacher is a witch.
Yeah.
So, I'm having fun with it. I'm delivering chapters one at a time to my 10-year-old grandson, who is both my inspiration and my audience. So I talk to him about plot and things. He gives me ideas. I build that into the story. I deliver some chapters, and then he gives me some more ideas. So I'm just kind of building that as we go along.
Is this stuff that's available like on Amazon? Is it KDP? How can people see this stuff?
So on Amazon, I have 10 novels, the 9 sci-fi and the 1 mystery. I have a juried collection of short stories that had been previously published in a journal, but the journal doesn't maintain back copies. So when they go out of print, they go out of print. So this keeps those stories alive.
What was
And,
the journal?
East on Central, a journal of art and letters in Highland Park, Illinois.
Okay. And
Uh,
what are the sci-fi novels?
oh boy, there's a whole long list. Uh, so the first ones were written directly to my daughter when she was at overnight camp, and I'll tell you that story. There's a trilogy about an alien seed that lands on Earth, grows into a human body, and joins a bunch of hobos, and travels the country with them, visiting libraries and assimilating information from nonfiction books in those libraries. He thinks he's on a data gathering mission.
So the alien seed is like it's an information gathering like organism. What's
Uh,
it?
yeah, it is a seed for an alien species. Uh, and he thinks his mission is to learn all about Earth by visiting libraries and then bring that information back. But
Okay.
he's been lied to, and he's at Earth for a much more dastardly purpose.
What's the purpose? Is it a spoiler?
It's a spoiler. I'd rather the reader
Find
read.
out.
Yeah, that book is the first of 3 called Invasive Species.
Yeah, okay. Well, in the title alone, you know that it's not something good.
Yeah,
So does he look fairly human?
he does, although it's written in close third, uh, and so he has stick-like fingers, and so there are some references to some things that are a little otherworldly.
A
But
little off, but he could pass as a human.
he passes as a human.
Okay, and what that's you have a trilogy, or is that like an ongoing series?
So when I was writing the first one, I realized that the story was bigger than I could put between a front and back cover, similar to what happened with the creative deductions. And as soon as I knew that I had a second book to follow up, I knew there was a third as a conclusion. So that's a closed set. Uh, uh, the second book is Invasive Species Seeds, which kind of tells you what's going to happen. And the third is my food chain. I knew
Okay.
it was food something. So the third book in the series is Food Chain, and you learn why that creature was sent to Earth in the first place.
So you don't learn until the third book what the like core mission of that creature is.
Yeah, each book has a different problem to be solved, or its own story. One of the things I like about that series is that you can read one of them and there's enough in it so that you can understand the characters, and there are multiple characters, and read it as a book, and you'll be satisfied at the end. But it's a much more satisfying read if you read them in series 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. So if you read them in order, you get like more of a full picture of the story.
Yeah, even though each book has its own arc for the story and hopefully good character arcs, uh, reading the entire series gives you a holistic view of the entire arc, and I think that's a better experience.
Are you approaching this sort of from like a Stranger Things, Goonies angle with like kids and the like there's something weird going on? And like maybe the like adults don't believe them or nobody really understands.
Uh, no, I haven't used that aspect, although that'd be an interesting thing to use in the young adult novel. Uh, that the kids accuse the science teacher of being a witch and no one believes them. So thank you for that. Uh, but you learn from everybody. You get ideas from all over the place. Uh,
Well, I thought the nice thing about Stranger Things is that it's kind of like the Goonies as the inspiration, but it's not a ripoff. Like they didn't take the Goonies and try to replicate it. They like took some aspects of it so it has that kind of feel to it.
yeah, I think there are two really important things for me in my writing, maybe more than three. Uh, I certainly want to entertain my readers. I think that's important. Uh, for the sci-fi novels, if there is real science in the novel, then I want to make sure that science is accurate, so someone can actually learn something in reality from my fiction. Uh, the other thing that I want to do is give people the chance to think deeper. So what I attempt to do is have issues in my stories that after you finish and you read the end and you close the book, there's something that sticks with you that you think about at least for a little bit and reflect on. And if that happens, then I think I've really done my job well.
Yeah, some of that early like 1930s sci-fi stuff did not age well at all. Like, with like you could breathe in space or like Mars is a full atmosphere or whatever. So yeah, no, I definitely give props to anybody who does their research before they put something out. Um, as far as the young adult, one thing I wanted to ask is I remember talking to Jeff Strand about this, and he says when you raise a young adult, rather than all right, so I'll go back a little further. When I was a kid, I'd read, if I read a young adult, I really disliked it because it felt like they were talking down to me. But he was saying, Jeff Strand was saying, when you're raising an adult, it just is coming in the voice of a young person. So it's a young person's outlook on stuff as opposed to it, simplified speech. How do you approach it?
Uh, so if I wrote something that talked down to my 10-year-old grandson, he'd let me know about it. So I don't do that. Uh, the other thing I can tell you is that uh, his other grandmother, so not my wife, was babysitting the grandkids at the house, and she saw I printed out like a little booklet, and there were 8 chapters in it. So she read the 8 chapters, and next time I saw her, she said, "I read the story. It's really good." She said, "But how does it end?" So I, by accident, I got a reader and fan that'll help motivate me to write some more chapters.
Well, I've noticed kids, especially, they want like everything answered, like all the questions answered, a solid ending. And I think as you move along, you more accept their like not everything being answered. I mean, one, that's life. Like not everything has a clear cut answer to it. But that whole like kind of David Lynch sort of, you're not quite sure what's going on. You just have a rough idea, but it's open to interpretation. But the invasive species, you're saying it's a little bit more definite, or it's a little bit more open, or was your daughter liked it even though everything wasn't answered?
Um, there's so many books, and they vary, uh, certainly in plot and characters. I think they also vary in terms of payoff at the end. Uh, the novel from last year was called Forward and Back. So sci-fi, time travel, because every science fiction author eventually has to write their own time travel novel. Uh, and everyone knows that time travel isn't real science, so they won't learn the science of time travel from my novel, but they'll get my interpretation. I tell people that it is the perfect science fiction time travel novel, and that's not bragging. Uh, I've seen so many movies and I've read so many books where an author creates their time travel rules, and you learn them as you read the book, and then they turn around and violate them, and that just galls me. I mean, they set up the rules. Why couldn't they follow them? So my primary goal in Forward and Back was to make sure that I didn't step on my rules. And so there were probably 12 to 15 critics that provided critique on chapters. And I had 6 beta readers on top of that. And their mission at the beginning of any meeting or in the marching orders I gave to the beta readers was find a place where I messed up and violated one of my time travel rules. And none of them could find one. So I went, okay. I put the book out on the market last year on Groundhog's Day, which is a great day to put out a time travel novel because of the movie. And I had a contest. If you buy the book on the day of release, within the first 30 days of the book's existence, if you find an error in my time travel rules that I violated, first person to do that gets the book for free. I waited 30 days. I got a couple of emails about things that might be improved in the book, but nobody who bought it found an error in the time travel rules. So that's why I call it perfect.
I'm curious, what are the time travel rules?
Well, so when you write a time travel novel, you have to make some decisions. Uh, so simple ones. Can you move forward or backward in time? So once you're past that, then if you go back in time, can you change things that affect the future? Well, that's kind of a yes or no. Uh, if you go into uh, if you have an object and it is in the future, so you move to the future and you have this object, something great that was invented in that time period, can you take that object and bring it back in time? Because it didn't exist back then. So you have to make those decisions and you have to be consistent in the application of those decisions. And I had an oops while I was writing the book. I had an oops. And there was a guy, he was dressed in clothing. He jumped 80 years in the future. He still had those clothes. And then he goes back in time. And he was wearing the same clothes, but that would have meant there were 2 sets of those clothes, the ones he was wearing and the ones that were in his closet. Well, that's an oops. So when he travels back in time, and it wasn't the instant he left, it was before then, he's naked because his clothes, the ones he would have been wearing, were in his closet. So I went through great lengths to make sure that I did not violate my rules.
I think I'm a little bit of a science nerd. I think that what I've read about um, most scientists seem to think that time travel is impossible, but you could go to like every time you go forward and back, you go to an alternate dimension. And like, are you familiar with the multidimensional theory? And
Yes.
and like
Uh,
maybe you help create another dimension by traveling.
so that was one of the decisions I had to make. And for simplicity, because if you go to multi dimensions, then you have to worry about a whole lot more things. Uh, about what happened to you have to you're responsible to the reader to make sure they understand what happened to the dimension that was abandoned. And I did not want to deal with that complexity. So I simplified it and said time travel within a universe is doable, yes. Can you go forward? Yes. Can you go backwards? Yes. Can something exist in the past that's created in the future? No. So if there's a dollar bill that's minted in 2020 and you go back to 2010, that dollar bill you had in your wallet isn't there because
Okay,
it didn't exist.
right.
So I was trying to keep the rules relatively simple for the benefit of the reader.
But I still think that like even if the character, if all of his stuff was like left in the you know the present and it goes backward in time, like his actions can still influence what happens in the future.
That's true. And one of the things that my protagonist, Randy, experiences when he goes back, and he's not trying to make a lot of changes, but he notices that just because of the fact that he went back, that people's behaviors are different.
Right. It's
And,
like the
and he
butterfly effect. Like you do one thing and like it changes the entire world.
and so he notices a bunch of really positive things that have happened, and he's feeling good. I went back in time. I haven't. He's a physicist. I haven't mucked with things. In fact, things are better. Uh, and the punchline is that they are not.
Right. Well, that's very like Twilight Zone or Outer Limits, where like you do one thing and you think everything's perfect, and then right at the end of the show, there's that little reveal where you're like, "Fuck," you know.
You're exactly right. The plot line for the back half of Forward and Back is time Twilight Zone-ish.
So is this part of that invasive series,
No, this
invasive
is
species series? Is a different story?
different story, standalone story.
Okay.
Uh, and for anybody who buys it and reads it, uh, when you get to the last couple of pages, you'll realize why there cannot be a sequel to this story.
What's it entitled and how is it available?
So all of my stuff is available on Amazon. Uh, the short URL to get to my author page is www.gerfnit, GERF is in Frank, NIT.com. That'll take you to the author page. And that novel is Forward and Back, available both in paperback and Kindle ebook.
Have you tried anything like draft to digital or audiobook or like all the other venues other than just Amazon?
So the latest novel, the mystery Creative Deductions Home Run, uh, is available as an ebook every place. So it's on Apple Books, it's on Barnes and Noble, it's on Kobo. Uh, I
Oh,
feel
there are a bunch like
yeah,
Smash Words, yeah.
yeah. So that one has broader ebook distribution. Uh, and I went to the trouble because I think that one really deserves it. Uh, like I said, I feel good about my first entree into mystery. Uh, Audiobooks are tough uh, because if you get a good voice artist, they won't do it for free. Uh, and so it's a financial question of how much do you invest versus what the return will be.
Well, I've noticed like my latest book is available via audio, and I have a new one coming out. And again, I had offered to do audio. There are a lot of people that just take a percentage of sales. Like you don't have to pay them up front.
That would be something that I should look into because I thought voice artists would, just like illustrators, would want their payment up front.
Well, my last company that put it on my book, Crossroad Press, like they offered to do an audio, and they said you can either pay the guy up front or give him a percentage. I mean, I probably should have paid him up front because the audio sells way better than anything else, but it was nice because like they a couple different people gave me little snippets. There's like an audition, so I picked the one that I felt was the best match, and then he gets a percentage. I still get paid. It's not like he gets like an overwhelming percentage. But I think it's a good thing because a lot of people like I'm amazed all these people these days would be like I'm like hey, you want to check out my book, and they'll be like, oh, I don't read. Like, what do you mean you don't read?
I have met some of those people. Most of my sales are ebook sales, which is
Right.
which is one of the reasons that Creative Deductions Home Run is on multiple ebook platforms uh, because I think that was worth the effort.
Yeah, I think like I noticed the ebook sales are often bigger than paperback sales, but I need a paperback. I like after a while, like just staring at the computer screen, it fucks with me. So I need like a physical copy in front of me. That might just be me. Maybe I'm just old.
No, uh, so I'll tell you a brief story. Uh, the first book I wrote by accident. My daughter was 11 years old. She was going to overnight camp for the first time for a week. And she had only one request: Daddy, write me a letter every day. Uh, and I talked to some other parents who had older kids who'd gone to camp, and they'd written to their kids, but the letters were boring. They were what time they got up in the morning, and what they had for breakfast, and what they did at work, and what they had for dinner. I mean, these are letters that the kids shouldn't have wasted the time to read. So I always try to do something a little better. And so I decided that I would write her a story, but it would be a story that would have some life lessons in it, kind of snuck in between the words, and something that would make her feel competent. Now, she was completely competent at camp and didn't feel bad at all, but I'm a father and I was worrying. So I sat down, no script in mind, at my computer, and I started to type a story. And every day I wrote one chapter and sent it to her under a fictitious name and said, you're getting to see the first chapters of a new story. And this is special for you. No one else is going to see this.
She didn't know it was you.
Oh, she knew it was me.
Uh,
And I'm sure she laughed when she saw that I had a pen name. So the first year was 7 days, so I sent her 7 chapters. She came home. I said, "How'd you like the story?" She said, "Oh, I liked it, and everyone in the cabin liked it." So suddenly, instead of an audience of one, I had an audience of about a dozen. She said, and they liked it too. So I stopped writing. It's next summer. She says, I'm going back to camp. It's going to be 2 weeks. Are you going to continue the story? I said, sure. So for 5 years, during the summer only, I wrote chapters of that story. And people at work knew that I was writing it. Family and friends knew I was writing it. And they all had the same request. I want to read the story. So when she was finished with overnight camp, I took this mass of words and did some edits and made sure the transitions between years was good. And it was early on with print on demand. So I found the company Ex Libris. At the time, they were in Princeton, New Jersey. And for a fee, they would put the book in a database. And anyone who wanted it could have it printed on demand. So I didn't have to buy a bunch of books and sell them out of my basement.
right.
The only thing they sold at that time were hardbacks.
Okay.
A year later, they had paperbacks, and a year later, they had PDFs. So I took with like again, I had hardbacks. Well, the first time the book showed up at the house, and I held one in my hand, and I saw my name on the spine, my words inside. I got goosebumps. It was this really emotional experience, and I realized that I didn't want to stop doing that. I wanted to keep writing.
Okay. Um, I mean, I feel like you got to be careful with the whole like doing it for a child audience. Like George Lucas kind of like screwed up, I think, Star Wars with that like the prequel trilogy, which he says he was trying to write it to his kids, like for a younger audience. And I know that like some people when they write for a younger audience, they try to edit out stuff. Like they're like, oh well, maybe I should be like not quite as violent. I shouldn't have like foul language. Did you run into that sort of stuff?
So I kept foul language to a minimum. Uh, there was threats of and some violence. Uh, but the thing that I did to be a challenge to her, so you have an alien. The alien is on Earth. They're at overnight camp, but they don't know how Earth works. They don't know the names of things. Uh, One of the jokes is that they show up with some gear and their name is on a tag on every single piece of gear because they came to realize that Earthling children label their stuff, but they go overboard and they label absolutely everything. So everything has a tag on it. Uh, but they don't know if there's a picnic table, they don't know that it's called a picnic table because they don't know the language well enough. So they call it a horizontal sitting surface.
Yeah,
And so the book starts out once Gerfnet lands on Earth. Uh, he's describing things in his perception of their function as opposed to their name.
right. No, that's kind of clever. Yeah, I
So
like that. I like that angle.
yeah,
But go
so
ahead.
instead of shoes, they're foot coverings, uh, and it goes on and on. So the challenge for her was to decode those descriptions and turn them into English. It does not make it a simple read, uh, and so somebody has to really think about as they're reading what these things are describing. It is the perfect book for a parent to read to a kid. So if the kid says, I don't know what that means, the parent has an opportunity to say, okay, well, it describes this. What do you think that looks like? And so reading the first couple of chapters might take a week
Right.
or 2 weeks.
Well, I'm sure that there's also like local dialect and local like like they make them names for stuff that like it only like you'd only understand what they're meaning if you like you're from Massachusetts, you know. So if you're from Texas and you read it, you're like, why are they calling it that? What are they talking about? But it's like it's a local cultural reference.
One of the gags early on is that despite all the preparation, Gerfnet did not give itself an Earthling name. And early on, one of the counselors says, "What's your name?" And Gerfnet looks around, is trying to figure out what to call itself, and it looks down at a pair of shoes that someone is wearing next to him, and he mispronounces it and says, "My name is Nikki," but they were
Uh,
wearing Dickies.
right.
So there is a strong sense of humor in the story that I think keeps people entertained.
Right. It sounds like it's because it's like with little kids and stuff. Again, it sounds like they kind of like Goonies vibe, Stranger Things vibe, where it's like you don't like little kids like they don't have like graphic sex and like they don't have like tons of cursing. It's like it's just not part of their psychology. So it would ring true even when like more dramatic stuff happens to them if they don't have the kind of reaction like a 19-year-old would have.
Yeah, and I tried to target my daughter's increased sophistication in reading each year. So the first letters when she was 11, I tried to make sure that it was within her capabilities. Now she was a strong reader anyway, so I didn't have to dumb anything down. But then the next year she's 12, and then she's 13, and then she's 14, and so her sophistication got better. So one of the things I had to do in edit was think about, okay, how do I smooth that out a little bit? I don't want it to feel clunky. So when someone moves from the first segment of the novel to the next segment of the novel, that it feels like a different book.
Do you use an editor at all, or you just use beta readers and you edit it yourself?
So I have a process that has worked for me now for the last 6 or 7 books. I attend National Novel Writing Month, and I use that to get the bulk of the story out of my head and into the computer. I leave it alone in the month of December, and I take 4 to 6 months to take that mountain of words, and that's trademarked, from NaNoWriMo, which is just a brain dump, into chapters. And then I share those chapters with 2 or 3 critique groups. And they tell me all the things I'm getting wrong and all the things I've forgotten. So it goes through the one group, and then I edit, and then it goes through another group. And I also have a consulting editor who looks at them in the middle. And when
Are these friends of yours? They're professional acquaintances. They're part of like some reading group.
Yeah, so there are 3 groups. 2 of them are just people with skills. So you have people who are writers who know what good writing is, and they provide their best opinions. The 3rd group has a professional moderator who's either a creative writing teacher or a published author who has a much higher sense of what works and what doesn't. And so I get a lot of different opinions. I guess I could pay an editor, but my perspective is that I would get one person's opinion about the work, and I would rather have 12 opinions because the first group will provide critique, and the second group that sees it will provide different critique. They'll find things the first group didn't find.
Right.
So that's why I don't want to put all of my eggs in one editor's basket. When that's all done, I do 2 passes on beta readers, 3 people for the first pass. I do another edit, and then 3 people for the last pass.
So, yeah, I think beta readers are very important. I have an editor, Carl Monger is my editor, but I went through a whole bunch of editors beforehand, and a lot of them are just frustrated writers. Like they want to rewrite your text the way they would write it.
That is a fear that I've had because I don't think they can help themselves in infusing themselves into the prose.
Right.
And I guess part of editing is having a light touch to the style of the author. And I don't think every editor gets that right.
No, one thing I really like about my editor is like he maintains your voice. He just like helps it smooth it out. So the same exact thing reads better because he rearranges a couple words, like maybe cuts something into like an extra explanation or definition that you don't need.
Yeah, somebody told me early on that I wouldn't find my voice as an author until my 4th novel. And it was early in my career, and I thought, oh my God, 4 novels. How am I ever going to do 4 novels? So now I'm at number 10, and I will claim that I have found my voice. And the way I'll justify that is that people who have read more than one of my novels will say to me in passing, if I pick up a book and I read it, I can tell that you're the author because there is a style you have in delivering the words. And it makes it easy for me to read, and it's digestible, and I enjoy it. So I have developed a voice. As the author, the buck stops here kind of thing. I'll get feedback from these 20 people. And part of my job is to figure out what I'm going to keep and what I'm going to say thank you very much, but not use. And sometimes I will uh, not use something that might be fine for someone else, but isn't right for me because I couldn't do it in my voice, or it makes a fundamental change that, like dominoes, has a ripple effect through the entire novel. Uh, and so character actions and reactions and plot are decimated if I make this one change. Uh, I do have the ability, thank goodness, to be able to hold a novel in my head uh, and remember the flow of the novel. It gets tougher when I'm working on two novels at the same time. Then I get headaches.
And you probably mingled the plot lines together. I take notes. I feel like I have to take notes. So like keep stuff separate. But I agree that you're always evolving as a writer. I mean, and definitely the first thing you put out is not what you're going to put out by your third or fourth novel. I feel like my last novel was way more fluid than my first novel, but I feel like you're always learning. Like once you stop learning, you're dead.
Yeah, I was in uh, a discussion group. So I belong to a number of different writing support groups around the country. I belong to one called Writing Heights out of Colorado. And they get together once a month and we just talk about the craft of writing and we can ask questions. One of the questions I asked on the Zoom was for something like Creative Deductions that's 3 novels long, are there any tricks to keeping track of things so that when I get to the end, I haven't abandoned a character by accident. I haven't closed off a plot line appropriately. I don't want someone to read the third book and have a million questions left about what happened to this and where did so and so go and did this person get arrested. So I asked the question. There is no simple answer, I found out. But the way she phrased it really enlightened me. She said, as you're writing, uh, you're making promises to the reader. And what you have to do is make sure that at the end of the book, you have delivered on all those promises. And I thought that was lovely. So, of course, I created a spreadsheet because I'm a techie. And I am building, it's called Promises. And I'm building this spreadsheet that says in volume 1, in chapter 1, here's the promise I make. And then there are columns for what volume and chapter I fulfill that promise. And so I'm going to have to go back and read the first novel again for the billionth time to be able to extract all those, because some of those promises get resolved in volume 2, which is in edit, and volume 3, which I'm still writing. But I thought it was a very poetic way of describing something that otherwise would just be an ungodly chore.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. But there are some people that want everything answered, and I feel like and then when everything is answered, they're like, "Oh, well, it wasn't as strong as when everything wasn't answered." So it's like a fine line you have to ride between give them enough information to make it interesting, but don't over-explain everything.
Uh, yeah, one of the things I asked in one of the critique groups, I didn't submit a chapter that week, but I asked this group who had reviewed volume 1 and have seen a complete draft of volume 2, what do you want in volume 3? And so someone sent me an email with a list, and one of the items on the list was, whatever happened to this phony cop? Uh, well, in volume 2, she may have forgotten that phony cop is arrested. And so you see the arrest and he's taken away. I didn't feel like I needed any more for that particular piece of plot. I'd satisfied it. He'd been arrested, and my protagonist isn't going to worry about him anymore. So why should the reader? uh,
Right.
the justice system will take care of him.
And you don't need all the extraneous information about like all the like complicated legal processes and so on that he goes through.
Yeah, that would have been over explaining, and I don't want to do that in his circumstance. It isn't worth it.
That'd be like a more modern Stephen King where he tells you everything. Like I remember I read some of his early stuff and I really liked it. It had like strong stories, but then later on, like he spent a whole chapter describing toilet paper.
Um,
And you're like not to dump on Stephen King, he's written some brilliant stuff. I'm just saying, you know, that is a danger of being over descriptive.
yeah.
But all right, so are you focusing more on doing like murder mysteries now as opposed to sci-fi? Did you put that aside, or do you feel like you kind of ran your course with that?
So originally, Creative Deductions was going to be a single novel, and just like Invasive Species, it grew beyond the bounds of one book. Uh, so I have a complete edited draft of volume 2, which is called Creative Deductions Double Down. Uh, and it's got to go through some more editing, but it's getting closer to being ready for beta readers. That one will probably come out early next year. Uh, and I'm working on volume 3, uh, which doesn't even have a working title yet. Uh, but behind those two, uh, I have 2 more science fiction novels in the pipeline. One called A Smile Departs Late. And so I wrote a complete draft of it, but it's awful. It's absolutely terrible. I don't even want anyone to see it. Uh, because I showed the critique group with the professional moderator the first 6 chapters, and she asked me lots of questions, none of which I had thought about. Now, that novel was done kind of on the side. It was outside of my normal NaNoWriMo process. So it wasn't planned well. And so I didn't take the time to think about the consequences of the protagonist's situation. And that's what she was doing. She was reminding me that I needed to fully flesh out these characters and just not write at seat of pants.
Right.
So that needs a lot of work. And then I'm also preparing for National Novel Writing Month this coming November. And that one, I'm at the moment, I'm still collecting snippets of character and snippets of plot. And I'll start actually planning that one no earlier than middle to end of August. And then September and October, I will outline the story. When people ask if I'm a planner or a pantser, I tell them I'm a planner because I have the spreadsheet I'm working off of. But the way I use the spreadsheet, it's borderline pantsing because I know in a particular scene, I don't write by chapter, I write by scene. In a particular scene, I'll know who's there, I'll know the issue they're working on or facing, and how things turn out and how it moves the story forward. So I'll know all that. But during NaNoWriMo, I will pants the dialogue among those people and the descriptions from my protagonist's point of view. So it's a common.
I don't know if the dialogue even would be pantsing so much. Which, by the way, I didn't even know what a pantser was until like 6 months ago. Because, like, like I outline everything. Maybe it's my OCD, but I'm like, I outline everything, and then I kind of, but it's like kind of a rough outline of what's going on. It's like a storyline, and then like I'll come up with the dialogue that feels natural on the spot.
Yeah. Uh, the other thing that happens, and I'm lucky if it happens, is that my characters in the middle of NaNoWriMo, the characters will start to talk to me. It's usually about 10 days in. And my opinion is that the characters know the story better than I do. If I've done a deep development of characters, and I try to do that. So as I'm writing, I'm not making on the fly decisions about how they react to things. I know how they're going to react to things. I know their attitudes and opinions. And in a situation, if I've planned the character well, and you throw me a situation, I know how that character is going to react. That means that the writing I do in NaNoWriMo is a lot smoother and quicker. And I typically finish the 50,000 words well in advance of the end of the month. So I, if I believe I know the characters, then in a situation, a character might say to me, "The way you've set up this scene is not the way I would act." They push back. They want to do something different. And when that happens, I listen because they have an insight that I don't have. It sounds a little crazy, but the characters talk to me and advise me about the things that they would do. Uh, Early on, I thought, okay, I have a plot, and now I'm going to put the characters in the plot, and they're going to do what I say. That was ass backwards. Uh, the characters and their actions and reactions and how they deal with things, that's the plot. And so I have now adopted a very strongly character based, I guess you have to call it plot, but sequence for how the story runs.
Do you ever go back and edit earlier text to like make it jive more with like later, like you flesh out the character more and you go, that's not quite the reaction I think they would have, especially in congruity with what they're doing now.
So nothing that I do during planning is cast in concrete.
Okay.
You said learning, writing is always learning. Life is always learning. Well, when you're working on a novel, you're always learning about that novel. And so if I get to some point in the novel and figure out that I hadn't planned well enough, or there was something about the character that was different than the way I thought, uh, I'm having that issue right now with One Smile Departs Late, because I came to realize from the questions I was getting that I had not done nearly enough of a deep dive on my protagonist. Uh, I knew him at a superficial level, and the novel literally demands, that I know him much deeper. So I'm going to go back to that novel and create an outline like I would normally do for NaNoWriMo. But I have all this prose, so it'll be how much do I keep and how much do I toss?
Okay. Are you more comfortable with like murder mysteries or sci-fi? Is there like one that you're transitioning more to now? Like as often people find their kind of comfort zone as they write.
Yeah. Well, having started this 3-volume mystery epic, uh, I'm committed to finishing that. And with the first book out and the second book getting to beta readers later this year, I just have to make my way through the third novel, and then that commitment will be satisfied. But given the fact that A Smile Departs Late and the next Nano project are both sci-fi, I'm going home. I'm going back to a genre that is near and dear to my heart.
Okay, so sci-fi is near and dear to your heart. It's just like you're venturing out a little bit to, try other formats and other like sort of premises.
Yeah, it was an experiment to see if I had the chops to do it. I'm now confident that I do, given the feedback I've gotten and the reviews I've gotten. Uh, but there's a commitment that I've made to the readers that this is a long arc for my primary character, and so the arc will be completed before I go back to sci-fi.
getting back to those promises, you make promises to the reader, right?
Yeah, it keeps popping. Now that I've heard the words, it keeps popping up in my vocabulary.
Okay. All right. So what do you have out now and how can people see your work? How can they, purchase it or look into audiobooks? You should put some stuff out there, but let me know.
Uh, so again, the web address on Amazon is www.gerfnit, GERFNIT.com. That was the protagonist in my first novel to my daughter. And so that's all paperback and Amazon ebooks. The Creative Deductions Home Run is available as an ebook wherever you buy ebooks. I love getting email, so whether someone bought the book or not. So people can email me at author at gerfnit.com. People who are just interested in anything about my writing or anything I've talked about on your show.
Do you have a website or like a social media page where people can like keep up with what you're doing?
I can be found at Gerfnit Author, one word, on Instagram, on Twitter. Uh, uh, I, although I'm certainly technically savvy enough to build a website, uh, the choice I've made is not to, and the reason is that the primary purpose of it would be a place where people can get the books. Well, the author page on Amazon does that job perfectly well. And given that I'm spending so much time writing, creating additional content for a web page takes me away from the craft that I enjoy doing. So I have not participated in any of those sites where people would pay a fee to get additional material or backstories. Maybe in the future, but not right now.
Maybe in the future you do a TikTok page with like those little ballerina dresses, like buy
I,
my book.
I have thought about how I would portray Creative Deductions Home Run as a short TikTok video without dancing teeny boppers.
Well, I've seen Jeff Strand does a great job. Like he rewrote Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, like that B horror movie. It
Yeah.
might even be lower than B horror movie, but he rewrote it. And he does little TikTok videos where he like gets pelted with tomatoes and stuff. I don't know, they're pretty clever. Like it's just probably more advertising. He's obviously found a way to make it work for him.
Yeah. Uh, well, I love the craft of writing and the process of rewriting because writing is rewriting. Uh, but I am not enamored with the business of writing.
Right.
And so spending time on marketing uh, and creating additional non-book content and creating TikTok videos, uh, they're not quite a distraction, but I think they would take my eye off the ball. So
No, I hear you. You only have like so much energy and you want to put it towards something that you feel is more productive. But I kind of feel like you almost are forced to do social media, at least to some extent. Otherwise, you're like someone like Lovecraft who like he died poor and then like now he'd be like a multi-millionaire.
well, one of the reasons that I've been doing podcasts and I've done a good number of them is that uh, they persist. Once you create one and you put it out on your channel, it's there and people can see it the day it comes out, or a week later, or a month later, or a year later. And so there are little snippets of me out there in podcasts, and I'm hoping that if I reach critical mass, that people will come to know me, uh, hear my voice literally, and be interested enough to visit the website and see if one of the books is interesting to them.
Yeah, I've been noticing like a lot of people recently, like people even that are on like large labels, like apparently their agent of the label tells them go on podcasts to help advertise your book.
Yeah, I enjoy having these conversations. I like meeting folks who run podcasts, understanding their circumstances, sharing my point of view on things. And I really appreciate that we've had a conversation. There's some podcasts where they have a list of 12 questions. They ask you,
I feel that's really stiff. Yeah.
yeah. And after you answer the question, they say, "Oh, that's nice," and then they move on to the next question.
Right, right.
So I appreciate your format. I appreciate that we've had a dialogue. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for doing this. All right, let's wrap it up. I appreciate it. Give a shout of your name again and what people should look for.
So my name is Michael Pickard. Unfortunately, there are a couple of Michael Pickards on Amazon. One of them writes religious books. That's not me. Uh, and I hope your audience will take a moment to read the back covers that are on Amazon and see if any of them resonate with something they would like to read. They're all enjoyable reads, I promise.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. And with that, I'm gonna call it the podcast. But do you have any final words? Anything you want to say?
No, just thank you for the opportunity. This has been great.
All right. Thanks, man.